rather take note of what you raised and then raise question after your piece, please.
I'm happy with that. So, comrades, even so, I think we get the point here. There's an attack, and it's an attack that's come up for a long time, and it comes out of this neoliberal framework. And then what's interesting is all the kinds of recognitions and acknowledgements that Treasury and various people from the economic cluster give as to the impacts that this will have. So not only did they make reference to the low compensation in basic education, but here again we see from the Treasury Director General Dondam Mavujani, another acknowledgement where he says, and listen to this, public service employees should be fairly remunerated, but government is obligated to balance its wage bill with the broader needs of society. Nonetheless, he says, reductions of this magnitude will inevitably have negative consequences for the economy and social services. But these short-term costs are necessary to put the country onto a more sustainable footing. So they argue this in spite of the fact that, as we arguing, it's not going to do that. And this really takes lead from a similar perspective from the business press or Business Unity South Africa, who commissioned a report from a company called Intellidex. And they argue that South Africa must address three interlinked but distinguishable problems with respect to the public sector payroll. And that is that payroll costs are too high, the public costs are rising too quickly at more than inflation, and the public sector employment is increasingly unproductive. It's not adding value to the economy. And so what they said was, essentially what would be required is for government to take a cold hard look at its functions and decide which adds the least value. Then it would invoke the provision of a Section 189 Act of the Labour Relations Act and begin the consultation process mandated for retrenchments based on an employer's operational needs. That's what they propose. So, comrades, then the question is, so what's really happening in the public sector? Okay? And then what we see is that since 1995, now currently it's claimed that there's just above or about 1.3 million public servants, which means that since 1995, it's been virtually no increase in the size of the public sector. When in 1995 there was 1.2 million, 1,269,000 public servants. So that's a marginal increase. Now consider the fact that the population has grown tremendously over the period. Gives a sense of how few public service there are. There was a massive retrenchment drive in the late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah. And then even though in 2005, 2006, up to 2007, there was an increase of about 200,000 workers. Since then, since about 2012, there's not been a real increase in the size of the public service. In 2012, there was 1.26 million, in 2009, there was 1.26 million public servants. So since 2009, about 40 to 70,000 additional public servants. That's over the past 12 years, which is remarkable. So then we look as well at the size of our public sector as a percentage of the population, as I was indicating, following on from the previous slide. And then if you look at the public sector in middle income countries, that's about 6.8% as the size of the population, and this was in 2010, all right? And ours, when we measure ours, the size of our public sector as a percentage of the population, just over 3%, which means that ours is more than half the size of the average middle income countries in many instances we are at. The rest of Africa's size of the public sector is 3.9%. So ours is even lower, the size of the public sector is even lower than the rest of Africa, where less resources generally than Egypt. But of course, many people realize it's not the size of the public sector that's the problem, right? We know that there's all this amount of vacancies. Even by government's own accounting, I was saying that the National Department of Health says there's more than 40,000 vacancies, and a further research that indicates that 97,000 additional posts should be filled over the next couple of years. The comrades aren't happy with the policy. We're working on it. No. But they are saying that instead the problem is that people are being paid too much in the public sector, and that the wages of the public sector has been growing too quickly. So then I tried to look at, okay, so how is the wages distributed in the public sector? And then pulling from data from Treasury, you see that when you look at all public servants, most of them actually earn just less than just under 200,000 rand per year. And then the ones who do earn the more than that are generally the last percentiles in the OSD, or particularly doctors, and then educators generally earning between 200,000, but not more than 400,000 per annum. But doctors in generally account for about 8.6% of the total public servants, and account for about more than 30% of the total budget. Going further on this, we see that, as I was saying earlier on, and this is from Michael Sachs, that in 2016, 2017, about just over 60% of public servants earned less than 20,000 rand per annum. I think a lot of the increases came around 2006, 2007, with the establishment of the occupational, specialized, specific dispensation, the OSDs. But that was just to be able to get public servants, professional public servants, level of remuneration compatible, level of wages compatible with that in the private sector, and it wasn't even entirely so. So then, going to look further, we look at, so what were the wage increases of teachers, nurses, and police and correctional services? And this generally makes up the largest percentage of the workforce of the public service. And from this, we see that in effect, between 2009 and 2010, this is after the implementation of the OSDs, and 2016, 2017, that the average annual growth for teachers, for example, is 2.4% in nominal terms, and for nurses, it's 2.1%, and for police and correctional services, it's 2.2%. So over this period is actually a real decrease in wages, but not a real increase, unless, of course, you're going through the wage progressions and going through the 12,000 in a big way. But then you also hear this attack that when we look at the public sector wage compensation as in just rand terms, that it's more than tripled from what it was in the early 2000s, 154 billion, to now more than 580 billion. But this is completely misleading, because when we look at compensation as a percentage of total spending, so that basically accounts for kind of everything will rise at a steady rate. But then we see that actually from 1996, since the class 96 class project, there's been a major reduction in the spending as wages as total of government's total spending, where it used to be 40% of the total amount of government spending, to now where it's only at 32.8%. So then, remember when I was speaking about even South Africa, the business press are saying that we should not attack the public servants. She changed it to in a big way following the budget this year. And she says that Ramaphosa finally did what he had to do. And they are quote, it was an audacious budget. I want to go down politically. The biggie is the public sector wage bill. It's an open wound in the relationship between the AIDC and society. A strike with some sort is inevitable. Unions will have to send a signal that they cannot be completely ignored. This is now more than almost 2 months ago, and nothing has happened really. She said that the most militant of the union is now, and that they may do something. But she says that even though the PSA and FEDUSA have maybe been more vociferous, they've been speaking out more. They've never mobilized, they've never put people on the streets. You can't count on them. Where's Sato been? Sato hasn't done anything since 2007, 2008, really. So she says that even if Nahawu does do something, don't worry. Ramaphosa, Tito, you've done the right thing. They're not going to respond. That's the challenge that she's put forward to do. And they're quite confident, I think, and that's because they even got the backing of the courts. Now, the question is, what should we agree that it's a good idea to fund the reneging of the third year of the public sector wage agreement, and that everything that has been said, all the attacks are not true, right? All the things that they said is not true. However, we can say that the top levels, I don't know who was saying it earlier, I think it was Gordon or someone was saying, let's look at the very top levels of the income bracket and say how that can be reduced. I don't think that's an argument for others to make. I think that's the argument for unionists. Because that's the argument for unionists. Because that's powerful if you're making that argument. But in addition to that, earlier on, Comrade Zola was saying, when we demand 6% across the board, what does that do to inequality, right? It can deepen inequality if you look at 6% on 100,000 per annum versus R1 million per annum, okay? So we're making a proposal as AIDC to the public sector union. It's two parts. First, you gotta fucking fight, all right? Otherwise, we do. Secondly, in the fight against the reneging of the public sector wage bill, and in the proposals for the next wage agreement, rather than across the board a 6% or a percentage amount, we're saying demand 1,500 rand across the board or 2,000 rand across the board. And from our calculations, you can see by this table, this means basically that everyone from level 1 all the way to level 11 will have an above CPI increase, okay? And at the level 11 tax band is, our income bracket is 522,000 rand per annum. They're already quite well off, which is just above inflation. This would cost just over 30 or just under 32 billion rand this year, okay? Which is less than the proposed 36 billion that is being cut from the public sector wage bill. So this year can be a proposal that can be taken forward that could even win the support of the general public if it's not just put in the context of protecting wages and work, but in terms of what we need for the public service. And that it's not just who's going to teach, who's going to be the health worker. And in that way, it's not just the public sector union. It's as Zola said in the beginning, it's us as community. And in that way, it's not just the public sector union. It's as Zola said in the beginning, it's us as communities and rooted in our communities, asking for a just transition, for a just